Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. I am your host and personal safety expert, Pete Canavan. I bring over 25 years of personal safety and security experience to my role as the host of this show. As a cybersecurity consultant and martial arts master, I educate, teach, and train others through speaking, consulting, workshops, online courses, as well as self-defense classes, and we do that for corporations, colleges, and conferences. You can always learn more at my personal website, PeteCanavan.com. Safety Talk, we discuss and bring attention to a wide range of personal safety and security solutions that are available to both businesses and individuals, and cover the digital world and the physical world. So we've got another valuable and informative episode for you guys today. So thanks for listening. Today's guest is someone with valuable insights into how to talk to our kids about technology and social media and the various digital devices that our children just can't live without, right? She's the mother of 3 school-age children, 11, 13, and 15. And so decisions around technology use is something that she's dealing with every day. And I can relate to that because I've got 3 boys that are just a little bit older than that, 15, 18, and 20, and they just can't live without their smartphones and their gaming devices. That's just the generation we live in today. Now, our guest believes that educating kids and openly discussing the good and the risks associated with digital devices and the internet is necessary because that has, the purpose of building resilience, which is needed today. Everybody's out there posting a lot of things. It's easy to, be offended or have your feathers ruffled by somebody posting something out there. And so, I 100% agree with that we've got to educate our kids. We've got to discuss with them both the good and the bad that technology can bring to them. So our guest is a digital family expert at Custodial, which is a global leader in digital safety and well-being for kids and families. And, as you know, as parents who have to navigate raising children in our digital age, it really becomes increasingly more difficult to censor and monitor our kids' online activity. We can't be there all the time. We can't be with them every minute that they're doing stuff online. So get ready to learn some tips and some tricks that parents can use when approaching that digital wellness with their children, and how to also create a healthy and a trustworthy relationship with kids about the importance of their online activity and digital habits. And so it's my pleasure to welcome digital family expert Theresa Desuyo from Custodial to Safety Talk. Welcome, Theresa. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Pete, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, it's a great thing that what Custodial is doing and that what you're doing to help parents raise children in this digital world, because it is consuming our children's and our, lives to a large extent now, right? So navigating this potentially tricky and, sometimes dangerous landscape it's vitally important if we're to keep our kids safe from harm, because we see online threats can turn into offline threats. You have cyber stalking can turn into regular stalking. You have other things that, like cyberbullying, which can start online and it can lead to offline bullying. And so these things are related, and sometimes, a problem can begin in an online environment and then transition to offline or vice versa. So it's very important that we have our children and our kids understand what those threats look like. And of course, as you know, with teenagers, right, it can be tough dealing with teenagers that, quote, know everything, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's very tricky in today's world because we're constantly connected. Our own children are trying to compete for our attention. They see what we do in this ever-connected world, that we're using technology for work, for home, being productive, and we try to express to our children that we're using it for work, but those excuses can only go so far, and they model what they see. They see us online and not necessarily consider what might be dangerous or not, because if their parents are online, why shouldn't they be online? So what we do is certainly mirrored by them. So we have to be extremely aware of what's called technoference. This is a reality that we live in, and that means technology is competing, or children are competing with technology to gain our attention.
Sure.
So
So
while
I pulled up the
we're
website
Go ahead,
here.
yeah.
So people that are listening, have a chance. They can pull that up. We'll have the site in the notes. But it's uh, Custodio with a very interesting spelling. Custodio.com. So they can check that out because it has some information and some resources that parents can use, because it's all about how do we keep our kids safe. And as parents that are seeing our children go, really almost be raised to a certain extent by technology and the interactivity that they have with their friends and their peers is good and it's bad, right? Because they learn a lot, they see a lot, they interact a lot, but yet the information can really move at a very, very rapid pace, and they sometimes don't understand the ramifications of some of the things that they do, some of the things they say, some of the things that they post, right? I mean, that's the whole kind of umbrella of digital wellness, correct?
That's right. So they're not really aware of everything that do. In terms of digital wellness, what it really means is developing healthy habits with technology. It's understanding how much time we spend and how that time is spent online. And there are three main things that parents, adults in a child's life should be aware of. It's, first of all, acknowledging and being aware of how much time one spends online. Your self awareness is key, and being able to transmit that to children makes that a more credible discussion with them. The second would be to be able to distinguish between active use and sedentary or passive use of technology. Am I simply there because I'm filling idle time, or do I actually need to be there? And the last would be appreciating the balance between online life and real life. So, in terms of digital wellness, it's important for adults to behave in that way so that children can then um, practice the same habits as their parents do. And you mentioned, what we do online, what we post. You might be referring to what we call a digital footprint, or the identity or my profile that I'm creating online for myself. Both adults and parents, as they post and they share images of themselves online, are really leaving a lasting image of themselves. And children should be aware of what that means. Before allowing kids to use technology, I would encourage that parents first show them examples of other kids that are online of the same age.
So why
Um,
is it so important that they understand that? Because of the long-term ramifications? Because I think the term digital footprint is very good, because it describes, just like, you've got a footprint in the sand where you walk by and the footprints are still there, but when the ocean comes and washes it away, it's gone. But online, that footprint never goes away. It's there forever. So people can always go back and look for those footprints to see, what it is that people do, what are their habits, and these can all present risks to safety and security and everything at some point potentially in the future.
No, precisely. I mean, when children first get online, engage in social networks, which is really fun, entering chats, connecting with people that they care about, get to meet new people, have this diverse type of conversation, but it's in that context of fun. So there could be banter, different types of language, and that stays there. And to your point, that is a footprint that offline, it could wash away, but online, that stays there forever. So as they grow up and develop a sense of really what that means, as they become mature and become more self-aware, they might realize, wow, what I put when I was 10 years old or 11 years old builds my character, my profile, that professionally might have an impact, or when they're applying for schools and when colleges might do some searching about what this person is really about, to have a more well-rounded image of this person that they may or may not accept into their college. So it's important to be aware and have their eyes open to that potential of other people accessing the profiles down the line.
Sure, because in people, the kids of today, even those in high school and college, don't I think about how some of the things that they're posting and some of the things that they're saying could be interpreted or misinterpreted by a potential employer or by someone that is considering maybe dating them or whatever it happens to be. And so these kind of breadcrumbs or these footprints that you leave in your digital life, throughout social media and anywhere else that you happen to be, whether you're posting online or other places, it builds that sort of picture of you and your beliefs and your sort of feelings and your morals or lack of them. And so these are things that are important. But with little kids, if we start young, and that's what I really like what you're doing here with Custodio is you're starting this at a very at a young age to get children to understand. So obviously it's difficult. You are a parent of teenagers. I'm a parent of teenagers. It's difficult to parent in the digital age. Why is that? Would you say?
So Pete, just a slight correction. I have a 6-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So I have a teenager, a
Okay.
preteen, and a little one, and I have to educate all of them in different ways. This makes my job a lot more interesting because a 6-year-old is a digital native through and through. The
Mm.
13-year-old, what makes it slightly easier is that we've grown or evolved at a similar pace with technology. With teenagers, it is more challenging because their friends are there and they come back home and say, well, everybody has a phone, everybody is online, everybody has an account. That may or may not be true. That certainly comes from my 11-year-old much more than it does come from my 13-year-old. But the feeling or sense of not being excluded, being out of the conversation impacts teenagers. If that impacted us when we were teenagers, imagine now with social media where information is just the speed at which these messages reach kids and them being in the know is so important. That's just part of who teenagers are, with or with technology, and with technology that has become a lot more important to be in the know and at the
It is.
speed.
It's
Yeah.
tough because the internet can be a dangerous place, and as parents, we can't control everything, and that's not an environment like our home where we can control it. Like when the kids are growing up, and we can make sure that there aren't any sharp corners, and we can make sure that the cabinets are locked and they can't get into the chemicals or the alcohol or whatever it happens to be. So we have more of a controlled environment in our own homes, but out in the wild west of the internet, I guess you could say, and then of course you got the whole dark web aspect of it. uh, it's difficult, I think, for families to even get a grip on the various threats that exist, and so it's something that's imperative. It's something that we do to the best of our abilities. But what would you say are some things that maybe families can do to make the internet a safer place? Because as an IT guy myself, I know that I've been able to do certain things to restrict access at the router level. Well, not everybody may be savvy enough or technical enough to do that. So what are some things that you suggest that families do to try to make the internet a safer place for your children?
Sure. The first is it's never too early to have a conversation with your children about being online. They will be online, whether that's at school, whether they see other kids on the school bus taking out their smartphone. So whether they have that access immediately or not, it's important to have that conversation with children about the power of the internet, the good and the bad. Like you said before, it's good and bad. But the first three things before you put a device in a child's hands are setting the ground rules. Talk to your kids about what it means to be online before giving that access or device. They need to know the rules of the road before driving. I would never give my kids the
Right.
keys before they have a license or before they turn 16 without a permit. I certainly wouldn't put my baby into the deep end alone. And there's that important role of the parent today to be a guide because that information online is so complex. It can take different shapes and forms because of the people and entities, companies, organizations that are publishing images, videos, text, being resources that are credible or not. And that's in constant evolution and production. As we talk now, just within 60 seconds, there could be tens of thousands of new blog posts, millions of YouTube hours uploaded online.
Right, and it becomes overwhelming because it's like,
That's true.
what do you do? So, uh, I know I try to encourage people to use parental controls whenever possible, especially when the kids are younger.
Hmm.
I did that with my kids; they didn't like it. My wife sometimes thwarted my attempts because the kids would plead to her, "Can I please play for another hour?" You know, when I put the timer on, that after so many hours, boom, you no more. You had your allotment for the day. But then they would, oh, but my friends are still on, and now so and so just joined, and now I can't talk to them, and but it's like kids are the best persuaders. They're the greatest salesmen, right? We forget that. People say I can't sell. I'm not a salesman. Baloney. Every single kid is the best salesman in the world when they want something, right? Whether it's an
That's
ice cream
right.
cone or to stay up late or go see a movie or whatever happens to be, they will beg and plead and sell using every possible measure at their disposal, and they get very good at it because that's what they're trying to do, right? So they try to circumvent that. Now the so I mean, putting those restrictions on is definitely a good step. Whether you're putting in certain keywords into a filter on the router, you can do that at the computer level too, where if a kid is just getting curious and they start searching for something, whatever it happens to be, you want it to be blocked. You don't want them to get
Mm.
access to certain information. Now, out of the home, when they're on their friend's Wi-Fi at their buddy's house, or when they are, not again within the confines of the controlled environment that you can provide as a parent, then it's a little more dicey because we don't know what they're exposed to. And of course, other kids' homes may not have those safeguards in place, and so gee, why do you always want to go to little Mikey's house? Well, because he's got unrestricted internet. We can look up all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, who knows? So it's as parents, it's our responsibility to do whatever we can and to educate ourselves because it's tough to stay on top of technology. I mean, even me being an IT consultant, it's if I don't stay on top of it, I would be left behind quickly because the pace of technology just advances so rapidly. And it's so important because the tech now is in these kids' hands from the time they can hold a phone, right? I mean, you see them at 2, 3, 4 years old. These kids know how to navigate videos. They know how to click on the next video. They know how to find things. It's amazing to me to see the age that these kids start. And I pulled up, for those that are watching this on YouTube, or if not, go to the website, but you have the breakdown here of the children and their, digital journey, their, the beginnings of their digital footprint online. And it's staggering when you look at some of these statistics because according to what you've got listed here, which is sourced by Digital Day, 16% of kids 3 to 4 years of age have their own tablet. 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. I mean, most adults didn't get their own tablet till the last, 8 or 10 years ago, right? And then between 5 and 15, it skyrockets to almost half. 44% of these kids have their own tablet. And then, I mean, geez, 8 to 11, a third of them have their own smartphone, because it's like, oh, my friend at school has a smartphone. I want a smartphone. Why can't I have a smartphone? It's almost like a status symbol, but you're going to get left behind if you don't have it because they're all using Instagram and Snapchat and they're using all of these apps to stay in touch. And it's mind blowing.
That's true. And these stats are from 2016. They're updated stats that show that these percentages have certainly grown. Pete, I wanted to mention something or tag on to what you said earlier, that it's hard to stay on top of where our kids are, but that's precisely where we need to be. So you asked me earlier, how can families make the internet a safer place for their kids? The second thing I would say would be where your children are. That awareness is so important because then you speak from a voice of authority, of knowing, rather than saying, well, you shouldn't be on that. And you have no reasoning behind that. But if you are where your children are, upload the app with them. When you give them permission, and it should be you giving permission rather than them simply downloading the app on their own.
Right.
I realize there are different parenting styles out there, but personally, I think a no is quite powerful, because once you give a privilege to a child, it's hard to take that away from them. And again, putting
Absolutely.
this Ferrari of a phone in their hands, who would want to get a Ferrari taken away from them?
Right.
When I allow one of my children to download another app, my daughter, who's 11, she's been asking me to get onto TikTok for a couple years. This year I said, finally, okay, let's check it out, but I'm going to create your account. We're going to create a fake email address, and let's see what happens over the next 2 weeks. It was a private account. I checked out what she was doing. We'd sit down together, and then, I don't know, after day 3 or 4, a couple of people asked to follow her on a public account. I'm sorry, in a private account. Sorry.
Mhm.
And I asked her, do you know these people? No, I don't. Well, I don't feel very comfortable about this. If this is private, they shouldn't be able to see you.
Right.
And over those 2 weeks, different things happened that just didn't seem right. And so we took her off of it, and she was sad, but she understood it. So in having that conversation first, setting the ground rules, and then being where they are, that really gives you a stronger voice of reason and of authority, that you know what you're talking about.
And
Uh,
doing it with the child, I think, is very smart, because
yeah,
most parents would be like, "Yeah,
absolutely.
okay, we'll let you, go on it, and maybe we'll take a look at it later." And they're not, maybe taking those few extra minutes over the course of a few weeks, or a couple weeks, or a few days, or whatever it happens to be, to see exactly how some of these apps and these media networks work, because they are building profiles of you and selling that data to advertisers, and that's exactly what they're doing to try to get in front of whatever demographic the advertisers are looking for. And I mean, another stat that's on your website is staggering to me, because I knew it was high, but man, this is really high. And that is that kids between the ages of 5 and 7 years old are averaging 4.5 hours a day in front of screens. And then it jumps, up to, the tweens, 8 to 12, is up to 6 hours a day. And then teens, 9 hours a day connected. We wonder why these kids are walking around with, all these kids have glasses. It's because, they're on their phones like this all the time. The screen's here. They're not letting their eyes focus into the distance. And over a course of time, your eyes are going to get worse. The muscles in your eyes are going to weaken, and they're no longer going to be able to focus. And the solution is, I guess you need glasses. Well, you probably wouldn't have needed glasses. I'm not saying everybody, because some of it is obviously, because of genetics, et cetera. But, and there's a big but, I guarantee a lot of the kids that are wearing glasses, most of them have been on that phone for years, stuck in the middle of their face and not letting their eyes refocus on distant objects. And I tell people all the time, you got to look up, even if you're just doing computer work. Every 15 or 20 minutes, you need to look up and refocus your eyes on an object at least about 100 feet away. And that lets your eyes relax. And when your eyes relax, they can see further. So when they're looking close, the eye muscles all contract. They contract, they contract, they contract. If they never get a chance to relax, they're going to stay like that. And I mean, I'm no eye doctor, but I've done research on it. And guess what? I'm almost 50 years old. I've been doing IT and embedded computers since I've been a teenager, because that's back when they kind of started. And knock on wood, I don't need glasses. Now, I'm not saying that it's all because I'm always looking up from technology, but I do what I can based on the knowledge that I've gained to try to keep myself healthy. And that's just one way that we can do it as people that spend a ton of time in front of screens, whether it's our computers or our tablets or our laptops or our phones. We've got to give our eyes a break, right? And it's just a health thing.
No, that's true. And there's that physical aspect. Having your eyes fixated on one thing for 9 hours a day
It's
will
not
have an
good.
impact 6 hours a day. And 5 years old, it's 5 to 7, 4.5 hours. That's a lot of hours in the course of a day.
Oh, yeah.
Consider how many hours they're in school, the time between transport to and from school, and then what do? They just connect. Aside from the physical impact on eyesight, there's also the impact on their awareness of what's around them and being connected with the world, seeing a tree in front of themselves, or just realizing there's a person next to them,
Right.
not bumping into a pole as they're walking. It's
And
that,
it happens. People are
yeah,
very disconnected.
yes,
They're focused on what's in front of them and not paying attention. And this gets into all kinds of safety issues that I've gone into quite a bit in the past in other shows. But it's so true, because you've got to pay attention to what's around you for a lot of different reasons, right? Just like you said, just walking into something, but
yeah.
then God forbid there's a predator around, and so there are apps that parents need to know about. There are trends that parents need to know about. What are some of those things that you talk about, and that Custodio is trying to build awareness for, in terms of what trends and apps that are out there that parents really need to be aware of?
Sure. We have over 2 million users, so we have insights into where children are spending most of their time. And as you might guess, those are the big four: YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok.
Mhm.
There's a close fifth, which is Netflix, but these top four appear in all age groups. And what are the characteristics of these different types of apps? First of all, it's the connectivity with other people. There are hashtags that are within these apps. But the other thing is that these apps, I think you mentioned this earlier, they do learn your behavior. There are algorithms that follow what you're searching, what you've watched, what your tastes are, what you're attracted to, and based on that, they are serving more of that information to you, more of that content that makes it more addictive. So you
Right.
just don't want to put that thing down, and you just want more and more and more.
And
And
we've all got caught down the rabbit hole, right? You see
yes,
an ad
that's
for a
right.
video and you
That's
go, "Oh,
right.
that looks interesting." You click on that, and next thing is another
Yes.
one and another one, another, and you
Yep.
go, "Wait a minute, what happened to the last half hour? I got to get back to work," right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And on average, on each of these, a child is spending at least an hour a day. Um, but that's, if we take an hour a day on each of these, is that 4 hours? Then just dedicated to what's addictive, where social media is, where they're constantly in contact with people they may know or may not know. But going back to this trend around TikTok, for example, the clips are about 15 seconds each. Now, if we calculate what that is in the time spent on this specific app, that's on average, our users are spending an hour. That's 240 clips a day. So obviously, that does contribute to what's addictive, to the desire for on demand entertainment, difficulty to focus on anything because I want that to change every 15 seconds.
And we wonder why kids have trouble focusing. And
Yes.
there's so much, about, with problems with attention deficit, because the kids have no patience. They don't have the same levels of patience and that we had. If they don't have, like you just said, that instant gratification, that next thing, that next new thing, I see my kids sometimes, they're flying through stuff, or they even have two screens going, and I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm watching videos here while I'm playing this game. I'm like, ah, it makes your head hurt. But these kids are growing up with it, and who knows what that's doing in terms of their brain development, with all of this time and these habits that a whole generation now has, that are new, that we didn't grow up with. And so it's going to be very interesting, and it's also a little scary to see how this is going to be affecting them as they become adults and get into their 30s and their 40s. What sort of ramifications are the habits that they formed as children with this sort of instant gratification, need for new all the time? How is that going to affect them? And I don't see it going well.
Well, I think I don't have the research on it, but if this is an instant gratification generation, and this is the content that they're watching and believing, and it becomes 4 hours a day of their time, how do they later on become analytical, judicious, um, questioning what they see?
Right.
Then their world becomes quite superficial,
And
not
that's
asking
that's
the
where I see
question.
big problem. Just exactly what you said. A lot of the things that, you need, like, critical thinking. When you're not used to sitting and thinking and analyzing and that sort of thing, it's going to be much more difficult to focus, and
Exactly.
the
They have no
solution
time to
is not,
reflect.
yeah, it's not it's not medication, it's meditation.
Mm, quite right.
So the some very interesting statistics here, and a little bit scary too, that Custodial has put together, and we're going to talk a little bit about more what the company actually does and your solutions. But 34%, a third roughly of middle and high school students have experienced some sort of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a big thing. It's a big problem, and it unfortunately can drive kids to do things that, as parents, gives us nightmares, whether it's suicide or just depression. And I shouldn't say just depression, but obviously it's better than the alternative of taking your own life. But, we don't want anybody to become depressed. We don't anyone want to feel ridiculed or an outsider. These kids all want to feel as if they're part of something, that they're included, that they have friends, and they are, they want to be popular. And how do they do that? Well, maybe it's going to one of these other things, right? Like sexting. They think, well, I'll be popular if I start sending, content that's sexually explicit. And, people think I'm cool because I'm doing that. So, again, almost a third of kids are doing that. They're either sending them or they're receiving them. And then, of course, that can attract the cyber predators. The people who are out there lurking, and they're following people that they don't know, right? Like you just were talking about your daughter's account. People are asking to follow her. She doesn't know who they are. You don't know who they are. They could be a predator. They could be a friend, but you have no idea. And that's the scariest thing with a lot of it, because how are people measured today? Unfortunately, how many followers do you have? How many people are subscribing to you?
Right.
Well, if I've got 10,000 subscribers and you've got 300 subscribers, all of a sudden, I must be more of the authority. I must be more popular because all of these people are following me. You think you know those 10,000 people? No, you're probably lucky if you know 100 of them. But it doesn't matter. It's a numbers game. And so when you're accepting all of these requests from people that you don't know, just to inflate those numbers, to make you feel better, to make you feel, more popular than the next person, that becomes extremely dangerous, because some of those people may not have your best interests at heart. And that's where we really have to worry as parents.
That's right. So, I mean, these likes and followers is a currency of your self-worth. And
well put. I love that. A currency of your self-worth. Perfect.
And on social media, and teenagers admit this themselves. There's a New York Times column about it was a student opinion section of New York Times, and teenagers recognize that they're faking their lives, putting the best foot forward, not putting themselves up there in the right clothes, and because of that pressure to get those likes and followers, there's a lot of jealousy and competition, envy, that is, in the end, it becomes quite counterproductive to eating into this more critical thinking generation, and it just becomes very, very superficial.
The episode I did, the last episode before this, was all about deepfakes. And about how it's becoming so easy using technology, because the power of what we can hold in our hands today is amazing, that you can download apps and you can basically touch up photos and you can change appearances and you can put people's faces on other bodies and you can do all kinds of things, so that not only are you doing all of these things in the digital world, some of these things that you're looking at, or even you may be even the person doing it, are being faked. So maybe that really isn't, what your body looks like, or maybe that isn't really what the clothes that you're wearing, or maybe that isn't really where you went on vacation, right? I mean, all of these things now, you start to think to yourself, is that real? And that's always it was, if you saw it, you believed it because there it was. But now it's starting to get to the point, and I'm afraid it's going to get worse, where we're not going to be able to trust our eyes or our ears anymore. And so the technologies out there that are creating these deep fakes, there's also technology that's being developed to try to spot them using combinations of biometrics, matching a voice with a face, for example, where you've got that kind of, it's almost like it's like a two-factor biometric identity to know, hey, is this really the person that I'm seeing or not? So it's every time you turn around, there's something new.
No, that's true. And what it contributes to is that blurring of the lines between what's real and what's not real, and the appreciation for what's offline and online. And that's what we stand for, is really dividing your time between appreciating what's around you and making your time more productive, more meaningful by connecting with a real conversation, and not just within a chat from a follower that you may not know, that lives who knows where, and they're following you because of that hashtag or that filter that you've put on your face, where that's become acceptable in their own world to follow you. And
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, so tell us a little bit more about um, Custodio and what are the solutions that they have, and I guess your role there. So what exactly is Custodio? Because we're talking about how there's a solution here that can assist parents, in keeping their children safe. Give our listeners, our viewers, sort of a high level, I guess, understanding of what it is and how it works.
Sure. You mentioned parental controls earlier. So, on a more conceptual side, it really is putting the ground under children's feet, because there's so much content out there that you can drown in that. And what Custodio helps parents do is to parcel or dose the access to the content that's online, um, as your child evolves, as your child becomes more resilient, more prepared to interact and absorb the information they have online. So, how does it work? In a functional way. This system allows you to filter content, monitor time, and also allocate time over the course of the day, over the course of a week. And in terms of content, you can filter by category. You can, as a parent, also allocate time per app. And then at the end of a week or the end of the day, you get a daily report, and you get visibility into the interaction that your child has had online. And this lends itself
Wow.
to the conversations that you need to have with your children. So, what were you doing on WhatsApp? Have you made more friends on Instagram? So, I see that you downloaded this new game. What do you think about it? Tell me why you're attracted to it.
So this is an app that gets downloaded onto smartphones or tablets or anything that takes an app?
That's right. So you can download the way that it works. You download this onto your desktop or a smartphone or a tablet. Then you download the app onto the device that you want to protect, and then you can manage it remotely. So you don't have to go into the child's phone in order to configure or set the rules or limits,
Because
or
God
restrict
forbid they
anything.
hand that over to you for 2 seconds.
Yeah, well, that's all about conversations. Like, whose is this phone? Is You're borrowing this phone. This is my phone.
Yeah.
I'm letting you use it for what you need. And again, it comes back to the conversation. It's not giving the privilege until it's discussed.
If I
What's it going
asked
to
for
be
one of my
for?
kids' phones for a minute to look at something, you would think I'm asking them to cut their arm off. Unbelievable. It's like, well, why? But just give me the phone. I want to look at something, whatever it
Give me the
happens to be.
keys to your car.
Oh, they don't want to hear that. It's like, but again, it comes down to
Yeah,
conversation. You have to build those
yeah,
ground rules in the beginning. And as they get older, they like to push back more.
yeah. I have a hub where all the recharging happens. Everything has to go here. All the tablets have to go here. At nighttime, they go here. At mealtime, they go here.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
nothing on the table, because we need to talk to each other. No matter how painful or how banal our conversations are, we're going to sit here for an hour with no technology at the table.
Oh, you're my idol. That's very difficult to do. So kudos to you, Teresa, for being able to do
Wow.
that.
It
Because,
has to happen.
but you know what? But you did it the right way. You started when they were young. You established those ground rules. You let them know that this is how it's going to work. If you want this device, if you want to use it, these are the ground rules. And if you don't like them, fine. You don't have to have the device.
Yeah, it's clearly talking about the need and the want. And if you're the last kid on earth that has this, well, I'm so sorry. You're going to have to suffer through that. But, that's the decision that we make in this family.
So, so you have the app here, and obviously, as parents, we're doing this. As guardians, we're doing this to protect minors. We're doing it to protect the children. We're doing it to from themselves as much as from, outsiders. But I can see some parents out there saying, I don't really know if I want to know what my kid's doing out there, because it's going to upset me, or I'm going to be surprised by that, or I don't want to deal with it. So what would you say to those parents? Why should they be out there monitoring their devices and their social media? I mean, they're some of the obvious reasons, but what would you say to those parents?
Well, what I would say is that most of these parents would not do anything until it becomes a problem. So a solution like this helps you be proactive, preempt problems that could arise, and it allows a more progressive introduction to that content, whether it be good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you don't want to know, but why do you wait till it becomes a problem? I mean, I've talked to many parents and they'll say, I'm going to need that soon. Well, you need it as soon as a child is going to touch a device.
Right.
Um, because otherwise it becomes a problem. It becomes difficult to take that phone away from them. And then you lose complete control and credibility in front of your kids' eyes because they know much more about technology than you do. However, if you have that conversation with them as soon as you can, before you put your credit card down to buy that device for Christmas, that shiny new um,
Whatever it happens to
that comes
be.
out, yeah, put a little digital certificate in there. Hey, this is your present. Now let's talk about what this means. It's harder to parent today because the technology's everywhere. And like you said, they could be sitting next to a friend in their home where they have access, complete access to everything. But those rules are those rules, and that's their culture. But when they come home, this is how it works. But at least it allows them to understand that there are limits for a reason, even if outside of their own home they might be exposed to something else. Hopefully, they'll be a lot more judicious, a lot more aware of, well, this might not be the best thing I'm seeing, but I'm seeing it, but at least I know that it's right or wrong.
So from a technical standpoint, because
Mhm.
my IT wheels are spinning,
Yes.
does this app work within the home network, like the Wi-Fi network that you have to be connected to, or does it also work on the device independently, regardless of what network it's attached to or the cell network?
So it works, it's multi-platform, multi-device, so it works.
So it doesn't matter
Anyway,
if my kid's at my house, somebody else's house, the
that's right.
Wi-Fi at their work or their job or their school or anywhere,
Mhm.
it's going to behave according to the rules that I've set and how the device has been configured.
That's right, because everything happens in the cloud. And
Good.
so once you access your dashboard, whether it be you download the app on your smartphone or on your desktop, you can access it anywhere and simply logging into the Custodial portal, and then you get that visibility.
Fantastic. Because, I can see a lot of parents out there going, man, I wish I knew about this before I gave my kids their phone or their tablet or
Mm,
whatever device they're using, because it's something that it's our responsibility as parents. And I say this all the time. Our number one responsibility as parents is to keep our children safe from harm.
mm.
Now, when they're born, it starts with, watching everything that they pick up that they try to put in their mouth, right? Or that they, want to make sure that they're not falling down and hurting themselves, or they're not gaining access to something that they shouldn't that can injure them. And I mean, that continues for their whole life. And I don't care if your kid's, 5 months old, 5 years old, or 50 years old. As a parent, you're always looking out for the well-being and safety of your children, regardless of their age and what stage in life they are. I mean, I know that as a parent, no matter how old my kids get, I'm always going to be looking out for them and trying to keep them safe any way I can. And so having the right tools that make that job easier, especially in an environment where it's not as easily controlled, is something that is a fantastic tool that really is going to empower parents. So I'm assuming that this is also the sort of thing that could be used in a workplace environment as well, correct? Like you don't
Mhm.
want your employees, going on YouTube when they're in the office, or is that not really, it wouldn't really work that way?
It could be used that way, for sure. But our main focus really is parents educating their children. But yeah, this can be used in that way as well within the work environment.
Okay, so parents obviously need to have that discussion or discussions with their children about the dangers that exist online? How can parents speak to their kids about that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question about how they can speak to them.
Without being overbearing, without being in their, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to do, and especially with teenagers who, of course, think they know it all, right?
Yeah, and the first thing is, so again, it comes back to before they get it. Um, and if they have it already, it's having the discussion like, why do you want to get online? Why is it so important to you? What do you think you'll be doing on there? What do you think you'll be able to gain from being online? Asking them what they value out of it. I think that could be an extremely enriching conversation that could then develop in a natural way, asking it from their perspective first, and then turning around to understand how that could be productive, how that could be beneficial, what potential dangers or risks they might come across. But gathering that information from the child themselves then gives it a more natural feeling.
Lets
That's
us kind of
certainly.
guide that conversation based on their responses and what
Mhm.
they're looking to get out of it. That's very good.
Yeah, I
Now,
think it makes it more powerful with that conversation and easier.
yeah, I can definitely see that. Instead of saying, okay, here's this device, but this is what you're going to do and this is what you're not going to do, immediately, that's the wrong way to approach it, because then, regardless of the age, the kid's going to feel like they have no input, they're not valuable, you don't care,
They're going
right?
to
And then
shut
all
off.
these,
They're going to shut down.
right, they
Yeah.
shut down.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's kind of where I was going. They're going to shut down. And then that conversation is not going to take place, because anytime you try to bring it up, they're not going to want to hear it. And so asking them, showing a genuine interest, letting them know you're genuinely concerned, and letting them know, look, this isn't something that you can just blow off. This is not something that you can't say, oh, nobody's going to stalk me, nobody's going to bully me, nobody's going to. No, you can't think that way, because if there's anything that we've learned from any sort of event or any sort of problem where somebody has become a victim, it's that nobody ever thought it was going to happen to them, but yet it did. And so you don't want to have that 2020 hindsight and say, yeah, if I had done this, or what would have happened, if I did things a little differently. You want to be proactive, and so that you understand what those risks are, what the ramifications are of having a problem, so that you don't have to have it. And that's tough, especially when you start thinking about the more dangerous threats out there. Like trafficking. Look at human trafficking and child predators. How that's very difficult to have that conversation, because that is every parent's worst nightmare, to have your kid you know kidnapped.
Yeah.
And so, is there any real way that you guys recommend how to empower children to identify predators, which isn't easy, because you got a lot of these adults that are creating fake profiles of children to lure them in?
Right. So that child grooming happens where these people fake that they're a friend. They try to establish emotional connection, and they'll ask certain things. So things to alert your children about. Well, first of all, understand which apps they're using. So Custodio does allow for that. You can see where they're spending their time, and understanding that, oh, well, these are the apps where there's this potential risk. And if you see that they're spending a lot of time on these specific apps, well, alerting them to people can connect with you. And there may be people that seem very friendly, and you have to be a little vigilant. The first thing they do, well, not first, but a series of things that they do would be to sound as nice as possible.
Mhm.
They want to have conversations in private versus posting on your wall. They'll ask for personal information, like what they look like, describe what they're wearing. It's pretty awful, but these are the realities. They ask
Mhm.
things like where they live, where they go to school. They might
Yeah, the probing
already know.
questions.
That's right. They might already know things about them because of the hashtags. Hashtags are like having a GPS on yourself. This is what they do. They look for hashtags that are um, associated with children,
Hmm.
what's trending for them. And then they'll start to also, I'll ask a lot of questions around the information that they've already gathered about you. They'll
Very
also
interesting.
always agree with you, and they can follow you or that terrible word of stalking you online. So these are the things that we can talk to our children about. I think that it's extremely important not to scare children, but rather if you feel strange, if somebody's asking too many questions about you, then let me know. What's important is have that communication channel all the time. Just and going back to what you said, how do you have those uncomfortable conversations? First, it's knowing how these online predators use these apps, being aware, searching around on Instagram, searching around for hashtags, and um, speaking again from that voice of knowledge. I saw that things happen. These things happen. Were you aware of that? If they say yes, then you talk about it. If they say no, well, I'm going to show you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's starting by being aware, knowing what happens, and then having that discussion about how strangers try to be your friend way too soon.
Right. Well, and I'm sure a lot of people really didn't think about what you were just talking about, where they're using, for example, trends in popular hashtags that, a certain segment of the users is making popular, whatever that happens to be, whether it's a movie or it's something that they're talking about, and so these, the predators, they watch for that sort of thing, and then they start to search, and they look, and they see what other, what types of people are using these hashtags, and who might be someone they're interested in, in stalking or kidnapping or,
Yeah.
abducting. And it's just, as I said before, it's a parent's worst nightmare. And so
Yes.
to the parents out there that are saying, well, the chances of it happening are slim, or, I don't know if that's really necessary, I'm going to tell you right now, what's the alternative? Right? What happens if you don't have that discussion with them? What happens if you don't bring their awareness to this sort of a problem, and then something happens, and something happens really bad? And, fill in the sort of whatever image you conjure up in your head when I say really bad. But the bottom line is that is not something that any parent ever wants to experience. It's your worst nightmare to have, something happen to a child, because somebody decided they wanted to target them for whatever reason, because the child wasn't careful, they didn't understand, they weren't educated. And again, so much of this comes back to the education standpoint and making them aware of the problems that exist, and getting them not to just, kind of poo-poo it and be like, oh yeah, it's not going to happen to me, because that happens a lot. The kids, they think, I mean, all kids, I think, pretty much think they're invincible, especially teenagers, right? I mean, I was there, you were there. When you're a teenager, you think you know everything and you're invincible and you can do anything you want. And that can be very dangerous if you're not careful. And so
That's
that's,
right.
I'm sorry, go on.
No. But Pete, consider this. Would you allow your child to walk out in the street not knowing where they're going?
Exactly.
So we think
No
about the
way.
physical world and what potential dangers they might find walking down the wrong street. Online, it's exactly the same, and it's exponential because of these channels giving us the possibilities of getting a message out there so quickly, and people then finding that and then tracing it back to you. We wouldn't let our children walk outside on the street at 10 at night if they're 7 years old,
Right. But
right?
yet we know, you're right. You're basically letting them do the same thing,
Yeah.
but in a digital sense, where there's a heck of a lot more streets and a lot of them are really dark.
Yes. Yes. Quite so.
So, well, we're blew through our hour here, Theresa. I really appreciate it. If our listeners are interested in learning more about you or Custodio, the website I gave out earlier, just custodio.com, but spelled Custodio.com, which has some good information there, explains how things work, and I think it's really going to open up the eyes of parents and guardians looking to get a handle on the time and the technology that the kids are using. What about social media? How else can they find you? Just search the company name, or?
We're on Instagram and on Facebook. We're also on Twitter, just looking for Twitter, Custodio, Instagram, Custodio, and Facebook Custodia, and you'll find us online.
So just search for the company and find you to follow you. And I'm sure you guys share a lot of great information because there's lots of good info and stats on the site. And it's stuff that parents need to be aware of because the numbers are staggering in terms of how much time our children are spending in front of big screens and small screens. And it's important that we be responsible parents as best as we can be to keep them safe, to keep them secure, and to do right by them. So, do you have any last thoughts, Theresa, before I let you go here tonight?
Yeah, I just did want to mention that we are official supporters of Safer Internet Day, which takes place on February 11th. And this is an initiative that's global to raise this awareness of emerging online issues. And we are supporting it by attending the event. We're also getting it out on social media. And we'd like to offer your listeners a discount if they
Awesome.
sign up between February 11th and March 15th. They can use the code SpeakUp15 and they get that 15% off any one of our premium plans.
Fantastic. Really appreciate that. And those listening, you want to take advantage of that. Obviously, saving money is always a good thing. So really appreciate that. And for any of our listeners that are interested in listening to this or past episodes, you can always visit safetytalkpodcast.com or safetytalkvideos.com, which will take you right to our YouTube channel. And so again, thank you so much, Theresa, for being on Safety Talk. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. And as always, stay safe.